Good evening. Aloha. How's everyone doing tonight on a happy sunny Tuesday night? At least no rain. My name is Karen Umamoto. I'm the chair of the Department of Urban and Regional Planning at the University of Hawaii, and I'd just like to start by thanking all of you for attending today's session. Today is the third workshop in a 6-workshop series called Kakaako Our Kuleana, a free urban planning academy for everyone. The purpose of these academies is it's a public service provided by our department and brought to you by students in the community planning and social policy class for the purpose of increasing public awareness and doing public education about relevant planning issues facing us. And we thought we'd center the academy around Kakaako just because there's so many opportunities as well as so many questions about what's happening here. So we thought that by kind of raising the playing field and evening the playing field of understanding of planning issues here, we could have more constructive and productive engagement in shaping the future of Kakaako together. I'd like to start with a few thank yous. I'd like to thank the American Planning Association Hawaii chapter for co-sponsoring this workshop series. I'd just like to acknowledge Kimi Yuen, who is the president of the APA chapter. Kimi, thank you. I'd like to also thank HCDA for letting us use the community room here, and Daniel Simonich in the back, and Deepak for facilitating the use of the room. And to thank also Olelo Community Television for covering this, and also the students and staff at the Department of Urban and Regional Planning. I'm going to turn it over to Annie just to take care of some housekeeping things before we get into the program. Annie Ko is a co-instructor for the class.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Just some housekeeping things. If you are seeking AICP continuing maintenance credits, be sure to sign in the folder at the very front desk. We also are offering a certificate of completion to anybody who attends 4 or more of these workshops. And so if you have not signed in and you're interested, we want to honor those who have devoted their Tuesday evenings to coming and learning and sharing and discussing with other community members. So please sign in if you're interested in that. We'll be sending out more information to all the emails that we have. We won't have an official intermission, so please feel free to take a break at any time. There's a restroom through those doors, out these doors and over to the left, and there's refreshments out in the front lobby area. Because there are always more questions generated during these workshops than we actually have time for, please, please, please make sure if you have questions to write them on the white slips that we've stapled to the agenda. We're trying to get answers. We'll be posting and distributing them. So this is answers from our 2 questions from our workshop number 1. There are some questions directed to HCDA about plans, about specific topics. So this is what we received from HCDA. We'll be also posting this on our website. We'll be sharing the information from last week's workshop. There were a lot of questions on infrastructure at next Tuesday's workshop. And before I forget, cell phones on vibrate, please. I know you have lovely ringtones, but it is disruptive. Thank you.
Thank you, Annie. Okay, so housing and shelter is one of the most basic necessities of life. And it's something that's very difficult to survive without. What kind of house you live in, how big it is, where it's located, what access it gives you to schools, to transportation routes that take you to work, to take you to healthcare services, and many other jobs and other opportunities are all part of the housing equation and the conversation. We understand that housing in Hawaii is one of the most challenging issues of our day. We're facing a serious housing crisis. We have the second highest rate of homelessness in the country, second to Washington, D.C. There are many reasons for that, but part of it is the high cost of housing. We also have prime opportunities to create affordable housing, especially when there's so much new development happening, and especially with transit-oriented development and the development of rail stations all along the leeward and south side. But planning needs to be done, and resources need to be allocated for affordable housing to be built in high-priced areas. Today, we're going to hear from 3 speakers. The first is Matt Hom. Matt is a planner. He's one of those who went to the mainland for college, got a master's degree in planning, and we're so happy that he decided to come home and bring what he learned back home. He'll be helping us with what's called understanding some of the technical aspects of policy planning around housing. Then he's going to be followed by Miriam Gushken. Miriam works for EAH Housing, one of the few nonprofit housing developers in the state. And then we're going to hear lastly from Harrison Rue, who's been working hard for the city and county developing a housing strategy, which he'll unveil right to us this evening. So one of the things I just wanted to call attention to is this. This is the word cloud. For those of you who were here for workshop 1, we asked you what you'd like to see in Kakaako, and we tallied all of your answers, and the words that are in larger type reflect those items that more of you had on your list, and it goes to down to the smaller. So the item that people listed on their slip of what they wanted to see in Kakaako, more than any other thing, was affordable housing. Now, the reason why affordable housing is such a controversial issue, and we'd like to kind of clear the air and have us understand this a lot more. When people say affordable housing, it all depends on what? Affordable to who? All housing is affordable housing. Isn't that right? It just depends who it's affordable for. So unless we really dig down a little deeper to talk about how we're defining affordable housing, the conversation can get very intense or tense. And I just want to introduce this evening with just an example as a preface to what Matt's going to do, and he's going to go into it in much more detail. So these are 2 pie charts of how much affordable housing has been built or permitted in Kakaako between 2011 and 2015. So some people may say, look, 43% of newly built or newly permitted housing is affordable, while other people say, no, it's 6%. There's no affordable housing here. Does this conversation sound familiar? Right? So the difference is that it depends on how you're defining affordability, and that's what we're going to talk about today. And I'm not going to pop Matt's bubble by talking about AMI. I'm just going to hand it over to Matt Hom right now, and he's going to take us through this kind of legalese, but very, very important understanding of definitions. Please welcome Matt Hom.
Sorry. no worries. Got it. Oh, I can do it with this. All right, thank you all for being here tonight. My name's Matt Hom, and I'm a planner. And like Karen said, I went to school on the mainland, I came back, and I was lucky enough to find employment in my field. And the second thing I was going to do is obviously move out of my parents' house and find a place for myself to live. So I looked on Craigslist, I looked on Zillow, I was looking for homes within my price range. And it was actually really hard. There was so much competition for the homes that are on the market. And you know, I figured this is going to be really easy because I'm a single guy. I've got a job, like this should be really easy, but it was actually very challenging. So I can only imagine how difficult it is for a family of 4 with, I don't know, with young kids or an elderly grandparent in their household to find housing in the city. So I think it's really important for us to be here tonight and have this discussion. And what I want to do is make some of these affordable housing regulations that are pretty dry and very difficult, I'd like to make them easy for us to understand. And this is critical for us to understand because we can't have a conversation about how to build more affordable housing if we don't understand what these regulations are. So we need to be able to talk, like Karen said, we need to level the playing field so we can all have this conversation together. And next, I'm going to talk about the tools that exist to make housing more affordable for everybody. Because there are a lot of tools that are being used in the city, but there are also some tools that are being used elsewhere that we could apply in our cities. So maybe there's a little food for thought in this presentation as well. And then I'd like to help us understand, again, relating to this first topic, what exactly low or moderate income constitutes. Because that comes up a lot in the paper. They're building more low income housing or moderate income housing. So I'd like to help put a face to the name for some of these numbers. And again, I'd like to show some tools that are used elsewhere, just so we can have an understanding of what we could be doing in our city. Oh, wrong way. But this is a really big topic. I know you've all seen it in the paper. It's definitely being talked about at the state level and at the city level in these plans that we as planners look at that guide development in our city. But it's also being talked about currently at the city level as well. The mayor is developing his affordable housing strategy. And what it provides are policies, incentives, and financing tools for public and private partnerships to build more affordable housing. So it's definitely relevant right now, and it's a conversation that's occurring at the state and city level. But it's also something that the board, the new board at HCDA is talking about as well. And what the HCDA, the new board, would like to do is have their reserved housing program, have the housing units that are built remain affordable for a longer period of time. And they'd also like to build affordable units that are affordable to these lower income limits as well, which is very, very difficult to do. And finally, they'd like to create more incentives to build units at this lower income level. But when we hear, like Karen was saying, when we hear there's a need for affordable housing, we all have to ask, affordable to whom? Because housing is basically affordable to everybody at a certain income level. And if you look at the data, affordability is basically relative if you look at the data. I mean, a lawyer in our city in 2013 was making $92,000 a year, whereas a firefighter was making $54,000 a year. So what's affordable to a lawyer is going to be drastically different than what's affordable to a firefighter. So we have to understand the concept that affordability is relative. So what I'd like to do is help us understand how the government measures affordability, what these key concepts to measure affordability are, and how this guides the affordability of the housing that's being produced. And really, shouldn't this be easy to understand? For something this critical as how much you're paying for housing, it should be easy for all of us to understand. So that's what I'd like to do tonight, is kind of demystify some of this. So the first key critical concept that we're going to be discussing, whoa, got a crazy mouse right now. Bear with me. We've got this critical concept called the 30% monthly payment rule. So what the Fed says is that if your rent or mortgage payments are affordable if they're less than or equal to 30% of your gross monthly income. And this is really critical for us to understand because these low and moderate income housing programs are benchmarked to this 30% income rule. And some of you might be wondering, why 30%? Why not 20%? Why not 50%? What if I want to pay more for housing? And it is a little arbitrary. It's gone from 20% in the past to 30% now, but it's really, really important for us to understand. So I'm just going to walk us through an exercise just to illustrate this. So say you're making $20,000 a year, 12 months in a year. You divide 20,000 divided by 12, you get about $166 per month for your monthly income. If you take your monthly income and you take 30% of it, you get $499, which the government says you can pay per rent per month. And if you exceed that, you're paying too much in rent and you're considered rent burdened. So this whole idea of having to only pay 30% of your monthly income toward rent is what the government says will allow you to pay for your other costs, like gas or food. And the next critical concept for us to discuss is this whole idea of area median income. So this is the median income, and this is the earnings for all the households in a geographic area. In our case, it's Honolulu. And the government will take data on all of this and find out what the median average income is that people are paying. So this is really critical for us to understand because it breaks up all the income of all the households in Honolulu and divides it in half. So if you look to your right, there's an income limit bar on the wall. And this is an exercise that Dave and another classmate of ours named Sarah, who can't be here tonight, helped develop to take what we're talking about, which is pretty abstract, and concretize it and make it so you can look at it. So we're going to take a placard for median income. Dave, you want to grab this placard and this ribbon, and we're just going to stick it on the wall over here. So this year, for a one-person individual, you could think about this, say you have a son or a daughter, or you've got a friend, or in my case, I'm living by myself, so I'm a single individual. This one-person income limit in 2015, if you're a one individual and you're earning $67,000 a year, the government could consider you would be basically the median income. You'd be earning 100% of AMI, and you'd be smack dab in the middle. And Dave, if you want to hold this up here, just so it's easier for people to visualize this. Would it be possible to give Dave some tape so we can just... All right. So Dave's not standing up there all night holding this bar. So this is great. What this does is it breaks up all these earnings so you can extrapolate below it. So you can potentially you could be 90% of the median income. You could be 80%. Or you could even go above it. You could be 110% of median income. You could be 120% of median income. And what this allows the Fed to do is to benchmark your housing need. So if you're below median income, the government considers you in greater need of housing assistance. But the more you go above it, the less housing assistance you need, and the closer you get to being able to afford market rate housing. So again, this is all these regulations are benchmarked to this concept of median income. So, like I said, you can benchmark, you could be at 30% of median income. You could be at 50%. So we're just going to put up some really critical percentages for us to understand. All right. Let's bring all these up with us. All right, so the first important percentage for us to understand is the 30% income limit. So if you're a single individual, say again, your son, a daughter, maybe even yourself, and you were earning $20,000 a year in 2015, you would be 30% below median income. And the government would consider you extremely low income. But, all right, if you want to put that one up. The next important income limit for us to understand is a 50% income limit. If you were earning $33,000 a year in 2015 and you're a single individual, you'd be 50% of this median income, and you'd be considered very low income. So if you're earning basically between these placards, you'd be considered very low income. Is there any questions about this before we move on? Any quick questions? Great. Well, then I'm going to move on then. So if you're earning and you're a single individual and you're earning $53,000 a year, you'd be 80% of this median income, and you'd be considered low income. And again, you just move, if you're between this range of $53,000 a year to $33,000 a year, you'd be considered low income, and you'd be able to access some of the housing subsidies that we need. And if you're earning between 80% of the median income and the median income itself, you'd be considered moderate income. You'd be considered moderate income and also capable of earning some housing affordability, some assistance. But what makes this all very tricky is that all of these income limits below the median are set by HUD. It's set by the Fed. But if you go above this, it depends on what state or city you're living in. So since we're working Kakaako, we're going to be using the HCDA's income limits when we extrapolate above 100. So if you're earning between the median income and if you're earning $93,000 a year and you're a single individual, you'd be earning 140% of AMI. Sorry. And you'd be considered capable of affording market rate housing. But if you're earning between the median and this market rate benchmark, you're considered workforce, and the government and HCDA would consider you capable of affording some of the affordable housing that they're building in their neighborhood as well. So I'll just leave this all up here. Oh, if you want to tape up these on there as well. Are there any questions about what we just covered on here? Yes. This is all single individual. And I know when we think about affordable housing, we commonly think of families, but I'm going to put up some occupations as well, and the earnings are benchmarked to being a single individual. So we chose to base this on single individuals, the single individual household. So let's look at where our jobs stand. These are some common occupations. We've all probably had friends who were prep cooks. You know, we may know a firefighter. So where do our occupations stand in terms of these income limits? So, all right, so we've got food prep cooks and servers, and if everyone looks toward here again. And this is all based on data that the state had. All right, so let's stick up some of these. So, you want to do the food prep cook and server, Dave? In 2013, based on the data that we have, food prep cooks and servers earned $18,000 a year. That would be below the extremely low income limit, and they'd be very much eligible for some housing assistance. Next, we have secretaries. Secretaries in 2013, on average, were earning $37,000 a year. So, based on our bar, they'd be considered very low income. We want to tape this up here. And then we've got parking lot attendants, who in 2013 earned $18,000 a year. They'd also be considered extremely low income. And let me know if you guys want me to slow down in terms of our taping on here. I'm going a little fast. All right, good. And we've got firefighters, who in 2013 were earning $54,000 a year, which is between 80 and 100, so they'd be considered moderate income. And then we've got a single carpenter. This carpenter was earning $73,000 a year in 2013. You could put that carpenter within that workforce bar right here. And finally, we've got lawyers who were earning $92,000 a year. And they would just be a little bit under being able to consider to afford market rate housing. So, does anyone have any thoughts about this income distribution? Any quick thoughts before we move on? Okay, great. So we've got, these are just some occupations in our city, but let's look at some of the top 5 most common occupations in our city. And this is based off the same data set. So, out of these occupations, we have retail clerks, and they're the most populous, and we have 17,380 retail clerks in our city. And for retail clerks, in 2013, they, on average, were earning $22,000 a year, which would have them considered very low income. All right. And then the next most common occupation under the retail clerks were office clerks, with 11,000 employees a year, and they were earning $30,000 a year, which would also put them in the same income bracket. The next most common occupation were cashiers with 9,870 workers, and they were earning $21,000 a year. And already, I mean, it looks like, if anyone can take a look at this, if they can see it, where does it look like everyone is clustered in our city? In terms of these, I'm just going to crouch down a little bit. Where does it look like everyone's clustered? Definitely on the lower end. I think this really highlights the dramatic need for affordable housing in our city. And this is in 2013 as well. And then we have janitors, which are the 5th most common occupation in our city with 9,280 workers. And they're earning $23,000 a year. So if we were to just look at it now, based on our occupations, and based on the most common occupations in our city, there's definitely a strong demand for affordable housing, or housing that is affordable to these lower income limits in our city. And I know we're running a little short on time. We've got 1 minute left, so I'm actually going to have to end this exercise a little early. But I mean, I think this illustrates the point that my group members and I were trying to show, is that let's just show people where people are distributed in terms of these income limits. Okay, Karen says I can keep going. So, well, yes.
This illustrates that if our only income was from wages, then this would be a mathematical impossibility. But having everybody grouped on one side as the quote-unquote mean, it illustrates that income is not primarily from wages. Right?
What do you mean? Oh, in terms of the distribution, like if you averaged all the incomes. So they're outliers, is what you're. Okay. Well, I appreciate that comment. We've got time for one more comment, and then we'll move on. Yes, you in the back. Teachers are critical too. And if you're interested, please write that on your card. If anyone's got questions, write it on your card and we'll collect it, and we'll follow up on everybody after that. But I'd be happy to get that information for you. So thanks for your comments. The next thing we have is we took US data from the US Census, and it's organized by income brackets. But what we did is we took that information and tried to fit it within these income limits for this year. So while this isn't done by the census, and it's done by me, it's a way for us to kind of benchmark where our households in our city stand. So let's put down, we've got households in the market rate affordability. And just to let you all know, these are proportional to the number of households in the income limit, if you want to help me with these. Thanks. Yeah, great. So, sorry, everyone can look towards Dave and I at our distribution on the side here again. So we've got households in the market rate who are capable of affording market rate housing, which is over 140% of AMI, with 45,380 households. So we'll just stick this up right here. We're covering up the income limits, but next we have households who are in the moderate income affordability category, with 30,000 households. And next, we have households. Oh, that's fine. We've got households in the very low income affordability category with 47,000 households. Yeah, that's fine. And keep in mind again that these circles they're proportional to the number of households within them. And then we've got households in the workforce affordability category with 48,000 households. So if you want to stick this here, Dave. Thanks. And then next we've got households in the extremely low income affordability category with 56,417 households. For this, we're moving it up. This one is for a one-person household for this exercise. And then we've got households in the low-income affordability category with 70,000 households. So again, can anyone tell me in terms of this income distribution where it looks like we've got a lot of households? Definitely on the lower end. So I think this again highlights this strong need for housing that's low income affordable in our city. And if anyone's got time for a couple quick comments, yes. What I tried to do with the income, with the occupations, is to also get occupations that were representative of these higher occupation jobs so they can be earning at the market rate category. And we do have households who are on the higher upper echelons in that market rate affordability category, which would be that 45,000, those 45,000 households. Yes?
I'm curious why you look at gross earnings for this analysis and not net earnings.
We're looking at gross earnings. That's just what we chose to use. But it would be also very difficult to do net earnings because everyone's paying different taxes. So that it would be incredibly hard to calculate that. Great. All right, so now we've got this, we've set up our distribution, and now I'd like to just run through really quick some of the tools that people are using to help build affordable housing and keep affordable housing affordable in our city. So a couple of these tools to increase supply are our HCDA's reserved housing requirement. And we've also got the low-income housing tax credit, which many nonprofit developers use to build more affordable housing. And then we've got direct rental assistance for families, which are called Section 8 rental subsidies. So let's talk about HCDA's reserved housing requirement. And what this requirement does is it requires affordable housing to be built in all multifamily housing constructed in the Kakaako Community Development District. So according to these two statutes, it basically requires that 15 to 20% of units are affordable to households earning below 140% of AMI. So we've also got some things to stick on here too, just to visualize this. So if we want to stick this one up here, to show that the reserved housing requirement services families below 140. I'll give these to you. And the strengths of this requirement are that sometimes in really hot housing markets like Honolulu, the only way to get affordable housing built is to require people to do it. But the problem is that if you set the affordability requirement too high, you force developers to build more affordable units. Developers might be discouraged to build entirely, so they might build nothing at all. The next tool that's used is the low-income housing tax credit. And the way this program works very, very simply is that developers will apply to the state for these tax credits. And these credits are useful for businesses because it allows them to pay fewer taxes. So developers will go and talk to a big business and say, hey, we can give you these credits. It's great for you because you'll pay less in taxes, and you can give us some money so we can build affordable housing. And like any really expensive thing, you have to take out a loan for it. So you want to get a car, you want to build some housing, you have to take out a loan from a bank. But typically, for housing to pay off that loan, you pay it off in the rents you pay it off in the rents or the income you receive from your tenants when you sell the unit. So if you want to keep rents really low, that's less rental income to pay off the debt for your building. So you're going to need something to fill in that gap. And that's where the low-income housing tax credit comes in, because you get this money to help pay off the debt on your building. And Marion or Kevin, if you want to chime in, Okay, great, thanks. So in the state of Hawaii, what you can do if you apply for these credits, there are a couple scenarios, and usually people just keep all the units affordable. But you can have greater than or 20% of units affordable to households at or below 50% of AMI. So on our income limit, that's a lot of households on our chart. Or you can have greater than or equal to 40% of units affordable to households earning less than or equal to 60% of AMI, which is also a lot of our households. So it's a kind of interplay between how low in terms of affordability you want to go and how many units you want to make affordable in your project. And why this is useful is that it encourages private sector development in our affordable housing stock. But the challenges are that we get a limited number of tax credits each year, and that we have a few small businesses in our state with an appetite for these credits. So it makes it difficult to find businesses to sell these credits off to so you can get that subsidy money. And finally, we have tenant and project-based Section 8. And what this is you have the federal government pay a portion of your rent. So ideally, the voucher pays for 70% of your rent if you're a qualifying household, and the tenant pays 30%. And this is ideally meant to service low or extremely low income households. So it's a lot of households on our list again. But the challenge is that, we only receive a small allocation of these rental subsidies a year. And another issue is that there's often a lot of discrimination from landlords toward tenants with the Section 8 vouchers. But the state recently started allocating more of these vouchers again. So it's a good sign, and it does provide a lot of mobility for tenants. And it's, it just allows tenants to move to a lot of different housing stock than they might not normally be able to afford. And we're going to talk about a couple tools used elsewhere that we might want to consider in our city. So on the island of Maui, there's a thing called a community land trust. And what a community land trust is when an agency owns and manages a pool of rental or leasehold affordable units. And this is great because it allows for perpetual affordability. Because if you own the housing, you can rent it at whatever level you want it to. So you can keep it at that low rental level for as long as you want. But the challenges are that these housing units are usually leased. So many households don't want to lease their homes, they'd rather own it because you can build wealth that way. So it kind of goes against what our dominant ideas of wanting to own a house are. But it's a really great way to keep housing perpetually affordable. And finally, we have tax increment financing. And this is when a city government will think like, hey, let's create a redevelopment district. So they'll issue bonds to fund the redevelopment of a neighborhood. And then, assuming that the neighborhood becomes really nice, more people live there, the assessed tax value of buildings in these neighborhoods rise. And then the government freezes taxes at its pre-redevelopment level and skims off the increased tax value from it to pay off the bonds that they issued. Is that clear, or is there any questions about that? Great. They freeze it at that pre-redevelopment level. So they take all the increases, basically take the increases in tax value off of that to pay off the bonds. So the strengths are that they could be used to fund low-income affordable housing development. This was done up until very recently in the state of California, where if you created a redevelopment district, 20% of this money that was created had to be used to build affordable housing. But the challenges, if we were to implement it, are that political will is needed. So unless people want to do this, it could never happen. But hopefully it does. So where do we go from here? We could support legislation. I think we've seen that done really well with the creation, with this advocacy to build these accessory dwelling units. It's been done to increase the rental housing tax credit allocation, which developers use to help fill in the gap to build affordable housing, to help fund it. You could also rent to Section 8 households, and really recently the governor created this summit with the Hawaii Association of Realtors to get some of these realtors together and have them start talking about how the need to rent housing to Section 8 households. And finally, I think it's important for us to all get together and talk about this so we can get this discussion going. So I thank you all for being here tonight and being here to talk about this with all of us. So thank you so much.
Hey, thank you, Matt. We'd like to just show a short video now. We thought it was important that as we were doing our research and gathering information, that we also gather voices from the community.
I get it. If you're an owner and you've been holding on to this land for a long time, you want to make a long time for a owner. You're owner. I do the same with business. Same, but here, local people regular where go Kakaako. It was like really like there was.
As far as the development in Kakaako, I do believe that it was inevitable. It's going to happen, and it's bringing in, a lot more people into Kakaako. But the problem that I see with that is that there's not really affordable housing. We claim that we have affordable housing, but we do not.
to me, growing up, Kakaako was a place for the community. It was like this accessible place, an accessible resource where, you know, you could walk down and jump off the wall and go body surf Point Panic. I would hate to see it become, I personally would hate to see it become this symbol of exclusivity and wealth.
I really would like to see a place where people could feel like they're in a community, you know, and but it's got to be affordable, and I just don't see the affordable part. This building right here that I'm looking at was supposed to be affordable, and from what I've heard, secondhand, I couldn't afford it, you know, so I don't know who it's affordable to. You know, it's I guess it's a relative thing, but we don't need more rich people moving here. We need housing for people who live here, who pay taxes here all their lives.
The issue is with the high end of the market, the more expensive condos. There's like an unlimited market for those, and if it's not just here, it's, you know, anywhere in the world would love to buy here. I think one of the challenges that we face is trying to make more affordable housing.
I think what is going to happen and what I'd like to see are two very different things. It would be really nice if, like, there was a Kakaako where, you know, regular people could live here, but that's probably not going to be the case. And same with businesses too. You know, I think that we all think that the rents are going to go up, and they are going up in the redevelopment. And, I mean, I get it. You know, if you're an owner and you've been holding onto this land for a long time, you want to make money off it, that's cool, but it's kind of a shame how it's not really being made for the people who live here. And it's kind of weird to see, you know, across the street there are like all these homeless people, and then right across the street they're like building luxury condos. It's kind of like, maybe like priorities aren't right. And, you know, I don't know if there's anyone to blame, but it's kind of an interesting situation. So it would be cool. I would love to have a Kakaako where I could live here. It would be really awesome if I could live and work in the same place. But I don't think that's the case. Yeah.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Dave. I'm one of the students helping to organize these workshops. So at this time, we'd like you guys to do a parent share exercise. And I believe there's a question on your agenda that you got when you came in the room. So if you could please share with your neighbor and some of your thoughts on the question that we're asking, just for about 5 minutes, and then maybe we'll share a few of your insights. Thank you. Sorry, actually, we have a slide we're going to put up with the question on it. We're going to put this. I don't have it. All right, here we go. What should we do about the lack of affordable housing for the low to moderate income group? What should we do about the lack of affordable housing for the low to moderate income group? Yep. What should we do about the lack of affordable housing for the low to moderate income group? All right, we found the slide. Here we go. Just a quick parent share for 5 minutes on this question, please. Lots of good discussion. It's a good sign. Would anybody like to share? We'd like to share maybe 3 or 4 if somebody has any ideas. Any hands?
I was just going to say, rather than all new development, there's always a way of redeveloping older buildings maybe that were higher cost buildings as they get older. So like redevelopment rather than all new development to make more affordable housing.
Anybody else?
No, you want me to talk?
Sure. Tell them what you said.
What I said was,
Can you talk in the mic?
can you hold it then? But what I said was, Howard Hughes, not too close. Howard Hughes made affordable housing 30% way back then, and they used a policeman and a nurse to be the 2 subjects to be affordable housing of 30%. When that happened, those 2 people could not afford $700,000 for affordable housing. That was back then. Why can't we hold them accountable for what they did with contracts with the mayor of making affordable housing, where not even a policeman or a nurse could come in at $700,000 as their, Howard Hughes saying, affordable housing? Hold them responsible. Because if they say that, oh, we're going to make 30% affordable housing and they don't do it, they had a contract with the mayor, then hold them responsible, because what they did was ask for forgiveness from the mayor. The mayor said, okay, what do you want? We want it to be zoned as, luxury rentals. So now we're faced with another name of luxury rentals. Still no affordable housing. Now somebody's saying, oh, we're going to do it at Dixie Grill. But with another acronym. But it continues. All these years, we started off with 9 buildings. We have 43 buildings. There's no affordable housing. I'm fixed. There's more fixed income with a lot of other people here. But all you guys doing is drowning us. And you're kicking us out to go someplace else. I thought this is where we should live. But hold them responsible for what they do with contracts with the mayor or the governor. But to go down and say, oh, let's refix another building, that's what they're doing in Waikiki. They're going to Cohill Avenue. They're taking those 3- and 5-story buildings and they're rezoning it to make 40 stories, just like what you have here in Kakaako. So where does the cancer start?
Okay, my turn? Okay. You know, my understanding, HCDA was created in order to be able to not have to follow the rules that the city and state follow now. They could create other rules that would facilitate the process. Okay. There are other things that can be done that, well, let's put it this way. I was reading about this one place, I think it was in Canada, where they were saying that the higher up you go, instead of right now they're saying only 20% affordable, they were saying the higher up you go, when you have more density, 2 things. Number 1, the more density you have, the more stress on the infrastructure, right? So they're saying that, well, one person was saying in a forum, if they really build up, why don't we have an infrastructure tax that they would have to pay for that kind of density? That was one thing. The second thing, which is another place, was saying that the higher up you build, number 1, all of these upper buildings, I mean upper apartments, they're the luxury apartments, right? And we're talking about international rich coming in here. We're talking about, I was reading this article a while back that's saying, oh man, only $10 million, so cheap, I'll take 3. Literally, that's what the article said. So it's kind of like, we cannot afford to have housing, but the international rich, I mean, there's no problem. So, writing off of that article where it's saying the higher up you go, say maybe the first 10 floors, you just have affordability at the 20%. I'm just making this up now, okay. Say the next 5 stories, instead of 20% being affordable, and then there's the question of what is affordable, of course, yeah? 30% have to be affordable. The next 5 stories, 40% have to be affordable. Of course, the question of affordability, that has to be adjusted too. And you know the penthouse guys, $10 million, cheap, you know. They are not going to have any problem getting market rents. They have the money. We're the ones who need the affordable.
Thank you. I think we have one more comment in the back.
What's your name? Lauren. I just wanted to comment on what Lauren was saying on the government contracts. I think it's on government transparency. Is there any way we could see those contracts? Or I just wanted to know where you get your sources from. Is there any way we could view those contracts, those deals? Because he's saying you want to hold them accountable. So.
Actually, could we, just because we want to end on time and we have other speakers, I think you raise a really important point. I think the frustration that you're expressing is based on what you're seeing, what kind of housing is being built, and a lot of people cannot afford that. And I think what we wanted to do was to clarify, and I think Matt did a really good job. Can you guys thank Matt for a good job? I think it's really hard to explain why Kakaako is looking the way it is. I mean, one thing is that real estate, international real estate investment, global investment is becoming, is very active everywhere from New York to Hong Kong to everywhere. And Honolulu is a very, very desirable place. So the question we have before us is, we live in a market society, right? So people are going to build housing that's going to maximize profits. Howard Hughes, for example, they're a publicly traded company. By that mere fact, they're driven and they're held to trying to get the, to maximize profits for their shareholders. That's the kind of economic system we live in. So it's not going to be, whoever, the board is going to be voted out by their shareholders if they don't do that. So the question is, at what point does government step in to play a role? And what role should government play? And how much resource in the way of resources and regulations should government put out in order to secure housing for this segment of the population? That's the question, I think. So the question was, what should we do about the lack of affordable housing for the low to moderate income group? And this is a group that we don't have the infrastructure, the policy infrastructure, the resources in the state of Hawaii at this time to build for this group given the market conditions. One of the things, and I'm happy to, really happy to introduce the next speaker, because one of the few types of entities that are willing to build affordable housing for that group, the low to moderate income group, or the low to very low group, are nonprofit organizations, organizations that aren't seeking high returns on investment, or if any returns on investment. And in Hawaii, I have to say, we have very few, compared to other places, not-for-profit housing developers. But I'm really happy to introduce Marian Gushken from EAH Housing, who, and we're really, she's really a treasure. She's done housing development. She's from Hawaii, went to the mainland like Matt, learned to do nonprofit housing development, and has come back home to do it here. So she has, she's a treasure trove of experiences and insights. Please welcome Marian Gushken.
Good evening, everybody. Can you hear me okay? I tend to have a soft voice. Can you hear me okay? Thank you, Karen, for that introduction. Again, my name is Marian Gushikin. I'm with EAH Housing. We are a nonprofit housing development and property management company. And so with that, we have a very specific niche that we serve in the real estate industry, something very different than the market typically serves. And that's both driven by our mission, which is to serve lower-income households and build communities that those households can thrive in, as well as the programs that we access to build housing. This is crackling. Okay. So just to give you an idea of who we are, because there aren't many of us, as Karen mentioned, nonprofit developers. We're a nonprofit housing corporation. We were incorporated in 1968 in California. So currently we serve portfolios in the Greater Bay Area, Central Valley, as well as the state of Hawaii. We have about 95 affordable projects in our pipeline that we've developed, over 7,700 homes. And on the property management side, we manage close to 9,000 properties, both for ourselves, all of the properties that we develop, of course, we manage, as well as fee manage for third parties. So EAH was founded in 1968, but we came to Hawaii in 1996 through preservation efforts. We obtained a HUD grant that helped us to acquire and preserve Kukui Tower, which is 380 units in Chinatown, and save that from conversion, as well as the acquisition of Kalani Gardens in Mililani. It's another 119 units. We're currently working on refinancing that and renovating. One of our portfolio projects that we've recently completed included the acquisition and redevelopment of Kukui Gardens. It's actually 45% of the original Kukui Gardens development. We purchased the 389 units and then renovated that and have been operating it successfully with the neighboring property, which is now rebranded as Waena Apartments, and that's affordable to market rate tenants. One of our new construction projects is out in Eva Villages. We've been working on it just to give you a sense of how long these projects take. Kevin doesn't like it when I talk about how long it's taken, but it has. We submitted the proposal to the city and county of Honolulu to develop this particular site back in 1999. This is to generate 192 units total in 3 different phases. The first phase, it's a long story, so I won't bore you, but the first phase we finally successfully completed in 2012. That was to put 64 units online. These are all family rental units, and that's who we serve. We don't do ownership housing. We were serving rental, lower income rental households, generally in that 60% and below of AMI. The phase 2, if you go back, phase 2 is another 76 units of housing that we completed back in 2013, and we're actually just gearing up to start construction on the final 52 units this year, knock on wood. And that'll complete the development. But it's taken quite a bit of time, quite a bit of doors that we've knocked on to obtain the subsidies that we need to build these 3 different phases over time. And we'll go through that a little bit later. So this is just a purview of where we manage and where we develop. We're currently working in 3 different counties and serving over 20,000 residents. So again, by nature of our mission and the programs that we access, we're typically serving, I don't know if you can see this back there, the 60% tier, 60% and below. And that's basically driven by the low-income housing tax credit program, which Matt touched on. Generally, the incomes range from $40,260 for a single person up to about $57,000 for a 4-person household. Okay, and the corresponding rents that we're talking about, based on serving that level of household, range from $1,006 at the studio level to about just under $1,500 at the 3-bedroom level. These are gross rents. So what you have to take out of this, net out, is a utility allowance. And based on the high utility costs here in our state, that can range from about 100, 120, depending on your utility structure, to about 250 for a 3-bedroom unit, something like that. Okay, we're going to go through this and then come back to it a little bit later. But our basic, the programs that we operate with, which gets these projects online, are basically comprised of 2 primary programs. It's mainly the low-income housing tax credit, which we talked about before. But there are 2 aspects of that program. One is the 9% program, which is a competitive program that HHFDC applies. I know Craig Hurai was here earlier. He's the executive director of HHFDC. There he is in the back. So there's currently 1 round that you can apply for. It's competitive all the time and typically oversubscribed. So it's difficult to get an allocation. The second program is the 4% low-income housing tax credit program, and that comes in tandem with bonds that you can also utilize to finance your projects. That's the crux of the financing that we use. On top of that, you need what I'm identifying here in Block 3. First of all, land, and the freer the better for us. On top of that, the varying subsidy sources that we have to go get and line up, usually after applying once a year, because they're only available once a year. And then we have to stack them all together, keep the programs in check with one another to make sure you're in compliance with all of those regulations, and then pull the projects together, get your drawings done, get through DPP in a timely manner, and then close and get your project started, all within these prescribed timeframes. So while we have access to these programs, this is really the dearth of the piece that's critical and the piece that's really needed here. This is just an overview of the tax credit program. So it's been the driver of affordable housing units in the country, over 2.8 million throughout the country, and then since its inception, close to 8,500 units in the state. Because we're a small state, we don't get as much as I think we should get. It's $2.30 per capita currently. It's adjusted, but not by much. That means that yields about 3.2 million that was available this year. This is the volume cap that's available for the 9% rounds that we talked about before, the competitive rounds. This year, as it happens, the state got some return credits and unused credits, so its pool was slightly larger. Typically, the state will allocate maybe 3 projects a year. This year, they were able to fund 6 projects, Under the 4% program, which we apply for together with the Hulame program, which is the tax-exempt financing program, again, the program is allocated to states on a per capita basis, and we typically get that $300 million annually. Right now, the state is making those funds available in 2 rounds per year. They've also instituted some minimum threshold tests, so it's become more competitive to access this money as well. Okay, so one of the projects that we're currently working on in Kakaako is in tandem with Artspace Projects, which is another nonprofit developer based out of Minneapolis. And let's see, on this project, I think Artspace started working on it back in 2012, so not that bad. We're still making our way through the capital raise process, and we currently have an application, funding application into HHFDC for 4% tax credits and bonds. And if we're successful, we hope to break ground later next year. Oh, it's on, I think I have a graphic. Yeah. Oh, actually, I don't have the map yet. It's on Waimana Street. This is just a snapshot of who we're intending to serve with this. So Artspace has a unique model in that they're like us, they develop affordable rental housing, but they provide preferences to artists for entry into their developments. We're looking at developing 1 to 3 bedroom units, and then we're serving the 30 to 60% of the area median income range. And the financing picture, again, is with the 4% credits. We have an award of rental housing revolving funds, an award of home funds, affordable housing funds from the city and county, tentative commitment, as well as they've engaged in a long fundraising effort, so they're putting that money into the project as well. And that's also leveraging a ground lease with HCDA. Okay, and this project is a new project that we were just awarded in tandem with Bronx Pro out of New York City. It's micro units, so really the units are very small, 300 plus square feet. The proposed plan is for a 17-story structure on the parking lot that's just around the corner from here. It's 10,000 square feet. With the intent of developing it as, again, tax credit-based project, supplemented with all the usual subsidy sources, rental housing, revolving loan funds, home, if that program is still around, affordable housing program funds, anything basically that we can scrape up. Total development cost roughly $39 million. Just to give you an idea, if we go back to those boxes, those blue boxes, because of the rent that we get on these developments, because we're serving households between that 30 to 60% level, our rents are restricted. So that means we can only carry a mortgage that's very limited. In this case, I think on the art space projects, it's maybe $4.5 million out of a close to $40 million project. That means that the difference between the development cost and that mortgage has to come from the subsidy sources. Now, to a great extent, that comes from the equity that we raise by the sale of the low-income housing tax credit. That's why it's such a valuable program for us and very effective. Currently, given the market, we're getting just over $1 for the credits, which is a great market for us. But it doesn't cover the gap. So in the case of the art space project, for instance, equity is projected to cover maybe 45 to 50% of the total cost, but the other half of that gap has to come from the state, the local government, and those are the sources that are really limited. And for instance, in the EVA project, it took about 6 rounds of the home program to secure awards, plus CDBG funds, plus NSP funds, plus this and that. I mean, so just to give you an idea, it does take some time to stack those funding sources up, which leads to the long time and cost to getting these affordable developments done. So I can answer any quick questions about No, you're talking about Kahuku, the rental. Yeah, no, it's just seniors project-based, right? 64 units.
Any other questions?
There's a question here.
You said you started the project in 1999, took you till 2013, 2014. I know there was some economic downturns, but was that your primary problem?
Oh, sure, sorry. He commented on the EVA project, which we started back in '99, and back in 2008 with the economic downturn, was that the primary problem. That was actually one of the key factors. That actually was a problem as well as an opportunity, because out of that downturn, we were able to access $2 million of neighborhood stabilization program funds, which the federal government laid out in response to the recession. I would say that the largest problem was accessing enough of those soft funds in sufficient volume to get the first project underway, because it did take multiple years to stack those home funds together. The other thing that drove our cost was financing the infrastructure out there because along with the 192 units, we had to build 2 roads, which we're in the process of dedicating to the city and county.
That's just a follow-up to what Riley was talking about. One, if the land is free, how much percentage of the money you raise goes to meet infrastructure requirements? And then secondly, what's the average number of multiple sources you folks go after for a particular project?
As far as the infrastructure costs, the EVA project was a little bit unusual in that we don't typically seek projects that require that level of infrastructure, although because we are living in a state with limited land that's available to develop, that's frankly sometimes all that you're left with, which is why we think it's important for HCDA to take a look at affordable housing development, because you're already in the urban core with infrastructure and services, et cetera, that can serve your developments. And I don't recall exactly what the infrastructure number was. With respect to the number of subsidies that we often have to line up, it can be 7 to 10 different sources. And remember, too, that with each of those sources, you've got each of those programs comes with its own set of regulatory requirements, regulatory agreements. The closing binders that we have for these things are often, 10 inches high because of all of the paper that's needed to document intent. Yeah.
Is this last micro unit the thing that's going to build?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So my question is, I was under the impression for some reason that, and that Cook Street is government land.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So the land is free. Oh, okay. Thank you. Anyway, my impression was that a lot of this truly affordable housing is built on government land. And are we completely used up now as far as government lands available for workforce housing? And if that's the case, what do you see as the future for truly affordable workforce housing in Kakaako would be? Number one, have we just run out of government land available for workforce affordable housing? And number two, how could you see more truly affordable workforce housing in the rest of Kakaako if we have run out of government land?
I can let other people address that from HCDA, but I don't think we've run out of government land. I think there are also opportunities not just for vacant land that's available or even underutilized land, for instance, that particular parcel, which is a parking lot, but also possibilities for redevelopment of land that the government controls. So, that involves an extra cost of demolition as well as building new, but it's something that can't be overlooked as another opportunity for us.
Okay, can we give a warm round of applause to... We also want to remind you that the white slip on your agenda is for questions. And Marion, would you mind if people asked you questions and you could write them down and then we'll get them back to you? I'd like to introduce our next speaker, who is Harrison Rue. He's and I never knew that this was your title, Harrison. Community Building and Transit-Oriented Development. That's a great combination.
We're looking for a little longer one. We couldn't think of any more words there.
Right, exactly. But he has well over 30 years of experience. He gave a talk in our department when you first moved here, and it was absolutely wonderful, and we're glad that you found a job where you could stay here for a long time. So thank you for coming.
Thank you so much, Karen.
This one has, I think this one has less.
More volume. I wanted to, we had a great exercise. It was nice to plan with props over there instead of all PowerPoint. That was a great thing. But to give you more details, we didn't bring 100 of them. So if you're interested in one of these, we'll pass them out and pass them back. Only take them if you're interested. Kathy Shokugawa put together a cheat sheet of all of those AMI percentages from 1 through 8 household, and then a number under it of how much of a home price you could afford with a 5% down payment. So a little more details on the numbers. Yeah, I'll move in just a second. I'm going to walk through tonight the very quick lightning round version, since we're running a little long here and I want to get to questions. You have in front of you, if you got it when you came in, a 2-page summary of the affordable housing strategy. Matt, do you have your magic clicker? Could I borrow that? That'll keep me from waving at Karen every time I want to. Go click to the next slide, Karen, while we're playing with this. I'm going to walk through this affordable housing strategy. Since you can download it online, the website will be at the end. It's about 20 pages long, but the summary is 2 pages, the key points. But, you know, what focus is, this is developed with a group of 10 or 12 city staff, and then lots of community meetings, meeting with stakeholders and developers and town halls, and lots of input over the last year and a half or so. But I think we've seen the crisis. Those big dots really show you what it is. We're going to talk a little bit about vision and principles.
Sorry, it only works with the PDF, so you'll have to wait.
Oh, okay, never mind. Okay, that's fine. But anyway, we're going to cover this stuff tonight. The strategic action plan, the latter part of that strategy, there's really 20 or so initiatives in 5 different categories. I'm just going to highlight a few. They respond to a lot of city council resolutions, so council is really on board with a lot of these things too. I'm going to highlight really 5 significant actions tonight as well. Affordable Housing Requirement Ordinance, which will help us get to some of the things that you've been talking about today, some incentives, things like that. TOD, the ADU ordinance, and that has been adopted by City Council unanimously. Can we have a hand for that bold action? I'll show a little more details. We're just really excited about this, and then some of our Housing First and other homeless initiatives next. Cutting to the chase on the need, this is the PowerPoint version of everything you see up there, but it's really telling the same story. Only 16% of the demand is for households at 140% AMI. You know, this is like the rest of us. You know, I fairly well paid. I earned something like this, but it's still hard. I've got lawyer friends who want to buy a house for a family with 4 kids, and they're earning a lot of money, and they cannot find a house. So even folks up at this end of things are still finding it pretty hard. But the 75% of demand is for this 80% AMI and below. And so that's almost all rental. You know, the self-help programs can target people with a home at less than 80, but in general, that's all rental. So our strategy for the, focuses a lot on this area. We'll talk a little about that in a minute. It's got a really good vision, I think, housing choices that build community, strengthen neighborhoods, and fit family budgets. Some stuff about design and how community, it's really about building community and not just building houses. Next. Actually, the vision, reading your word cloud at the beginning, that word cloud of everything everybody said at the last meeting, that's really all the stuff that's in the vision too. People are asking for quality of life, connectivity, access, things like that. So these are the 5 areas in the strategic plan. If we do everything that's in that plan, about 8 pages long, if city makes all the investments, all the codes, all the incentives, developers step up and do a lot of building, you're going to see a slight increase in the number of units built every year, and it would be just around 4,000 units over 5 years. We have a need, I didn't highlight this in the last, we have a need for at least 24,000 to 26,000 units right now. So that's, you can see it doesn't take, divide 24 by 4, it's going to take more than 5 years. The good news, go back one. The good news is if everything is done, there's 2 key principles. It would take about 15 years to get up to half the number needed, 12,000. But we did highlight that if the state took similar actions, keeps making the same kind of investments that it has recently and follows similar procedure, that would be the other half. It turns out it would be about another 4,000. That includes building TOD development on the state lands along the rail line, things like that. So we could address this need in about 15 years if we do every single thing in the strategy. Next. Those numbers, that was out of a state survey. The need did include a certain amount of population growth that was moderate, you know. But anyway, economists won't project really more than 6 or 7 years with any accuracy. Let's go. So I'm going to talk about just this one item, adopt affordable housing requirement. Some people call that, Karen? Yeah. Some people call that inclusionary housing or inclusionary zoning. And it would require a percentage, if adopted by council, it would require a percentage of all new development of 10 units and up to be affordable by people with low to moderate income, so kind of that end of the spectrum. It would require a smaller percentage of units than you're currently required to do if you're rezoning, but across more projects for lower income ranges. And here's the key thing, rather than just for 5 or 10 years, or if you notice in the one HCDA, it's like 2 to 10 years, we're saying it really needs to stay affordable for 30 years because that supply has to build up over time or we're not going to get anywhere. So that's the most important part in here. Forget the percentages, anything else. Maintaining affordability for 30 years is really critical. We can click over this. It will also apply to substantial rehab. It would exempt a lot of different kinds. If you're already building affordable, if you're building those micro units, you're basically tackling the problem. It would not apply to you. Next. We've developed 4 options. These are the draft percentages we're floating. We're working with stakeholders and development community to refine this. We're doing some more studies, looking at pro formas, but you know, a little lower percentage if you're building rental, a lower percentage if you're building on-site, and if you want to build off-site, not in your project, you have to build a little more housing. We want to incentivize rental as well. For people who are, for instance, building luxury housing or something where you don't want to build the units in your project, you'd have the option of an in lieu fee. And if you have extra land, you could also dedicate land for construction of rental housing as well. And that would be, you know, people like, you know, Kevin's firm would you know, or a nonprofit developer might build on that land. So next. 30 years is critical if the city, and we recommend the same for the state, but if city lands are used, it would probably be at least 60 years or longer of affordability. There's flexibility built into the rules, so if somebody wants to build at a 30% range to really hit those large targets at the end there, then they could supply a lower percentage. We can click through this. You might just move it forward a little if you're, you know, that. I get physical. Yeah, no, just do it. That way, you know, it's kind of hard for me to, you know, go up and down with it. Okay, but it's not just all requirements. We're working on some clear incentives as well. Matt, you did a great job of researching some of the incentives, but if you guys look online, there's about a 2-page list of all the different current incentives and things like that that are available through the city. But we're looking at reducing some of the other charges, wastewater facilities, park dedication, real property taxes. The city initiated zoning and lower parking requirements will also, along the TOD areas, will also be an incentive for developers. Next. Next one. So within I just wanted to highlight one thing. I'm not going to go into all the homeless stuff tonight because we're more focused on development, but even within trying to address the need for new building types. It was, thanks so much for showing the EAH one. We're just really strong proponents of building more compactly, smaller, working with the building industry to come up with new designs. I love this one over here. This is more student oriented. I can't run that fast. let's just leave it. Yeah. It's good. These are 170 square foot units, you know, for a student market, okay? So we're really encouraging the industry to think, you know, a little differently. Next. There's also key things about investments. There's some funding and things like that in there as well, but I want to highlight 2 things next. So we're working on this housing finance toolkit with reducing fees, taxes, modifying the existing affordable housing fund. We're working on establishing an infrastructure finance district as a pilot. Matt mentioned the TIF, tax increment finance. We're exploring that. looking at a new loan fund. Matt, you'll like it that the Community Land Trust is definitely a formal part of the strategy. We do want to work on that. Go ahead next. I don't want to read everything here. But that pilot infrastructure district we're looking at, I want to credit Craig as well for his leadership in this regard. We're looking at the Iwilei to Kapalama area up to around Honolulu Community College to see if we can come up with a way to accelerate the infrastructure, not just the sewer and water, but the roads and complete streets and things to really incentivize development there. I should mention, I didn't mention this at the beginning. So the affordable housing strategy is island-wide for the whole island. But there's also a focus in the TOD areas as well, which is my day job. And everything we've been talking about tonight has been about Kakaako Our Kuleana. Kakaako is not the city's kuleana. Its decisions are overseen by HCDA, a state agency. So some of these areas, so we don't regulate the housing and things like that in this area. But we're trying to work with the state agencies to make our policies more or less in tandem, so you're not looking at different rules on both sides of the border. But in this case, this would be a lot of state and city partnership because this is Mayorite Public Housing, that's Honolulu Community College. So city and state are really working well together in this housing and finance strategy. Next. Just one example of another catalytic project in the Pearl Ridge area. We're working on acquiring some land to basically just to be able to turn the buses around there because you're at Mackay of the highway. And so as part of that, we're looking at building affordable housing on top of the bus transfer center. If you can envision like the Alapai Center, but with the housing on top of it, because any place we've got land, we need to go ahead and take advantage of that. Next. And this is what it might look like along the trail. How many people here have ridden the Pearl Harbor Trail on bikes? So the vision is over time, next, to really see it as something like this with more affordable housing and really fronting on the trail. We're calling that trail-oriented development. Next. And then really getting into the regulation and zoning and incentives. Next. We've got neighborhood TOD plans. Kathy Sogawa is here. Kathy, you here? Yeah, her team is doing all of this planning work, and they've been doing it for 9 years. So there's lots of great vision. Affordable housing is assumed to be a part of all of this. But there's many different plans. You can go online and look at these and see what it could be like in your area. Next. But it's the zoning that really makes the difference. So, the zoning is what controls what people actually have to do. The plans of vision, the zoning is really what makes it happen. So we've got a series of, there's an existing development permit. Right now, for the Waipahu area, we're proposing a TOD special district for the 19 stations that aren't in Kakaako, so we'll cover those. And then we've proposed zoning map changes in Waipahu, and those are being under consideration by council right now. So that will be a lot of incentives for developers if they're meeting the community's vision. Again, go back to your word cloud. People want it walkable, less parking, streetscapes that feel great, gathering spaces, within a few blocks, and then extra affordable housing. Part of the zoning option is, well, in addition, if council does pass this ordinance to require a little affordable housing in every project, if you want the extra height that comes with the TOD, additional affordable housing is one of the options to get that extra height. Next. This is just an example of the zoning map in Waipahu as proposed. It looks kind of congressionally gerrymandered because, the single-family neighborhoods didn't really want to see, they don't want to see any change here, and this is the areas where the people wanted change. Next one. Same thing in West Loch. It's not that we start out with a circle, but this is really the areas that people want to see change. Okay. Highlight parking. This is incredibly important. We're basically slashing the parking requirements, and that will help make units more affordable. Next. My favorite thing that we've done in the last couple of years is really getting the accessory dwelling unit passed. Small cottages, additions, converted outbuildings. It'll provide well-managed rental housing plus additional income for owners. The bill that council passed would allow lot owners on any residential lot plus country lot, which are 1 acre lots, to build an accessory dwelling unit. if they have the infrastructure and if they've got a 20-foot wide road and a few things like that. Next. It requires the infrastructure availability as a maximum of 800 square foot. So that's how we're kind of governing affordability, but we're not going to get into saying what people can charge. It follows existing rules, so to protect the neighborhood. It does require either an owner, family member, or designated representative to live in one or the other of the units. Requires a 6-month lease, so these are not going to, they're guaranteed not to be vacation units. There's also a couple avenues. If anybody has existing legal structure, it can get converted. You know, you may have built it, but it may be oversized. If you have an illegal structure, you can even come in and talk about bringing that up to code and getting permitted to. That's a little harder, but you know, we wanted to make an avenue for people to come in out of the cold. Next, just some examples. You know, either one, you know, built out in front of the unit, on top of a garage, or accessory unit. Next. A little in the details, but we've got good brochures. If you're interested in building an ADU, you can go online and or walk into the building department, and you know, fairly simple guide to doing it. Next. But you know, we also want to really engage the architecture and design community to look at stuff that we haven't thought about: tiny houses, you know, micro units, things like that. Next. So just some images. You know, this is what micro units are looking like. Next. Let's just click through these. The tiny house movement, we're scratching our heads, you know. It's like, okay, this does not look like something DPP wants to play with, but we're scratching our heads and thinking, it's a new world out there. People are really downsizing. And so we want to be open next to some really pretty creative building types. So, you know, you can't do this quite yet, but we're actually scratching our heads and figure out how can we do stuff that's new, because you can have high quality life that's really, truly affordable, because we live outside. We go to the parks, we go to the beach. So anyway, and even things, you know, as ADUs on tiny lots, or here's a tiny home park, you know, where people gather together. Next. So last and not least, you know, we are proposing to have some key strategic staff to actually help do the deals. It's in front of council as well. And we have to admit that we need to do a better job of tracking our production and inventory. Next. This is what we think we're going to get out of if we keep moving forward. You know, we really development concentrated along the transit core, higher densities, more diverse home types, and ultimately more affordable housing. Right. We can skip over this. I want to just get to you can look at honoluludpp.org for this strategy if you want to look at it. Jen?
So based on what Marion says, you can't retire anytime soon.
No plans I can't afford. You know, I'm a wage slave. I got to work till I die, you know.
Okay, let's take some questions. Could we get some other people? Auntie, is that okay? Yeah. We'll get back to you, but just to give some people who haven't had a chance to ask questions.
Harrison, I've been bugging you about this for a while. When is the bill going to get to council?
Good question. So we introduced the strategy as a draft September a year ago, and then we came up with a revised draft after a lot of technical study this September. We've floated it out there for kind of informal comment. So at the moment, the initial comments are really need to focus on getting more of the incentives, kind of not just promises, but kind of bring them along with the inclusionary ordinance. So we're looking at those options right now. So my best guess is in the next couple of months, maybe January at the latest.
Yeah, I'm particularly anxious because I think you need to move while the crisis in housing and homelessness is there to help create the political will to push it through, and also some of the momentum of passing the ADU legislation. That had an amazingly broad spectrum of stakeholders who came out to push it, and that's why the council passed it unanimously.
Yeah, we agree entirely, Bob.
you like to make a comment on supply and demand is always working on the factors of production, land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship? It's a continuous process.
Yeah, could I hear the second half of that? I heard the supply and demand part, but the second phrase?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Supply and demand is always working on the factors of production, land, labor, capital, entrepreneurship. Yeah. Sometime, yeah, would you agree with that?
Sure, yeah, I mean, basic economics 101, sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sometime in the past, there was a study that was done in Hawaii on the major landowners, where 96% of the total lands were owned and controlled by 96% of the population. This includes the federal government, city government, and state government. And then you could break it down to the major landowners. Yeah. Growing up in the islands, I've watched this, the major landowners. You know? Some of the major landowners had most of the residential properties. So you could see the supply and demand being regulated. You know? Henry J. Kaiser had to bring in his own crews and his ships, his tugboats, to build Hawaii Kai. So I haven't seen anything change, okay? But as some of the major landowners went out, an example would be the Damon Estate, who were major controlling shares of the First Hawaiian Bank. Where did their lands go? Did it go to foreign investors? And do they own a good portion of Hawaii?
I don't know the answer to that. On the plus side in the strategy, what we've identified is there's about 400 acres of city land and 2,000 acres of state land along the TOD corridor. Much of that is in use for things like the airport and schools and things, but much of it is in play. So while we're not growing land, you know, a great focus of this is redeveloping the land we got, you know, along rather than continuing to move out into the country. So there is a lot of developable land. We've identified in the TOD area, without stretching much, just in the easier to develop areas, there's room for 55,000 units in the TOD, and that's in those tightly defined areas right around transit. Yeah.
Will people be allowed to rent out their accessory dwellings to earn money?
Yes, yeah, that's the intent. Yes, a good question, and yes, yes, and yes, that's the intent. And they'll actually be able to, a senior can build a smaller cottage in the back that's accessible, you know, if you want to retire into, and rent the main house for even more money if you're a senior.
Oh, when you were talking about the use of state and city lands, there was a sunset on the affordability that you said was 30 years and you'd hope to stretch it to 60. Why does that need to sunset? And is there a possibility that those could be made affordable in perpetuity?
Okay, so this is a draft. It's a proposal. It's basically our best guess at what makes the most sense for us. When we originally, you know, were doing the drafting, we thought, wouldn't it be nice if we could get it to 60 years? A couple of mainland cities are at 75 years, our life of the building. In perpetuity doesn't really make it work, particularly for things like state lands or city lands where you don't want to do the in perpetuity. 30 years, when we looked at all of, 500 places on the mainland that have done this kind of stuff, 25 to 30 or 50 years is kind of the range. 30 makes sense. We're suggesting that where we're, city or another public agency is putting money in, that it should be at least 60, if there's money. Those are not set in stone. Council will ultimately make that decision.
I promised Auntie the last question, so she's been waiting patiently.
Thanks. Yes, you mentioned that almost 500 municipalities in hot markets have similar affordable housing requirements as what you're proposing for the city. Could you give us an idea of what kind of success these requirements has had in those markets?
Sure. It's been largely successful. There have been some stories where they didn't get the formulas right and they asked for too much and it slowed development down. I would direct you, if you look online, we have two things. So I mentioned that, in the appendix, you can, if you look online at that dpp.org address, you'll see the strategy, you'll see an appendix. Within the appendix, we've got that list of financing incentives. There's a list and a table of about 18 other jurisdictions that that are similar that we pointed to, so you can see what they did. And there's also a new report about inclusionary housing that is really a very recent, put out by Lincoln Institute scan, that will talk about the success of lots of places around the country.
Could I use my MC prerogative just to ask you a closing question, which is, the gentleman said very aptly that a lot of this depends on political will. So what can people in this room do if they support the strategy that you just laid out? Is there anything that they could do to support these efforts?
Sure. Well, I would say look at and read the strategy. Let us know if you think it makes sense based on what you heard tonight. We think it addresses a lot of the questions that were raised here. If you have comments, there's an email address. I need to think about it. I think it's affordable housing at Honolulu. Yeah, it's one word, affordable housing at honolulu.gov. So you can send us your comments. But I think more importantly, as things go to council for adoption, be there and let them know what you think.
Thank you. Can we give a round of applause to Harrison?
Yeah.
So Harrison will return in 2 weeks when we have the session on transit-oriented development. So we look forward to seeing you again. I just want to close by asking Annie to come up. We really encourage you, especially those of you on the younger end of the scale, to really get involved if you can in affordable housing. Consider this as a career option. Talk to Marion about interning at EAH. Because we really need more young people, I think, to be concerned and really take the torch forward, and along with Harrison and many others in this field. So let me just thank all of you for coming, but let Annie give you a little teaser for the next 3 weeks.
So we're at the halfway point, which is exciting. Next week, we have a workshop, Envisioning a Place for Everyone, Voices from the Shoreline to Small Businesses. We have a 10-person lineup. We're not going to have them speak for 15 minutes each, but part of what we want to do is honor the diversity of folks who live, work in Kakaako. Actually, who here lives in Kakaako? Can you raise your hand? Who here works in Kakaako? Who goes surfing or otherwise comes here a bunch? So who maybe has a job in development, architecture, or planning? You can admit it. Okay, so part of what we want to do is kind of honor and tease out some of the different visions. Why do we care, right? Why do we care about Kakaako? Why are we here? So that's really going to be, rather than sort of urban planning tactics and strategies, we're really going to talk about that next week. Workshop 5, we're looking at leveraging rail. So if rail is coming, what can we do to sort of benefit from that and really think about, open space, affordable housing, all the other different issues that we really want to come true. And then our final workshop is looking at civic engagement and going forward. So Harrison and other folks have talked about, one thing that we can do is go to our city council members and say, hey, we want this. We really want you to put money and put the power of the city behind these kinds of programs. We can do that with the state. We can do that at a number of levels. So we're really excited. We're so thankful that people have been coming out and participating. We want to hear your input. So we have those green sheets. So if you have things that are questions, I am behind, but I will email everyone. We have great questions from the first 2 weeks. We'll have more great questions from today. So we want to get back to you, all that information that you've been asking for.
Thank you very much. Each one bring one next time. If you have a friend, anyone who's interested in the future of Kakaako, please bring them along, and we'll see you next week. Thank you very, very much, and have a safe trip home. Mahalo.